The paper that I work for, Vårt Land, is a Norwegian Christian daily that covers issues of faith and religion especially closely, and so it's my pleasure to moderate this session today, which has been organized by the Council for Religious and Life Stances Communities in Norway and the Council on Ecumenical and International Relations in the Church of Norway. Religious leaders and organizations have been key actors in the nuclear disarmament movement since its inception, and the threat of nuclear weapons is more severe today, as I'm sure you're all aware, than it has been for decades. And for many people of faith and people of no faith, it is a moral issue. For the next hour, we're going to delve into some of these questions that many faith and life stance communities must ask themselves now that we are grappling with war in Europe and the possibility that nuclear weapons will eventually be used in that conflict. We're going to hear from several leaders in the Norwegian faith communities today, and we're going to start off with a conversation. Our first participant is the lead imam of the Islamic community Bosnia-Herzegovina and chair of Muslim Dialogue Network Norway, which is the umbrella organization for 31 mosques and 31,000 Muslims in Norway. Please welcome Mr. Senaid Kobylica. And joining us on stage, the presiding bishop of the Church of Norway, the largest faith community in Norway. Please welcome Dr. Olav Fyksetveit. Thank you both for being with us today. I wanted to start by asking both of you, Mr. Kobylica first. Could you talk about a person or an incident that has influenced your view on nuclear weapons?
Since I'm coming from Bosnia, I don't need another example. I mean, we are still witnessing the consequences of the weapon that was used during the war, 92-95, that contained depleted uranium, unfortunately. And till day to day, we have people who actually suffer from that. And we have statistics saying that in those cities, areas where it was used 4 times, or people die 4 times more than normal because of cancer, because of the depleted uranium. And that's something we have been trying to draw attention, especially from the politicians, from political establishment, from the international community, and so on. But that's something actually we can talk about maybe later, or there is some kind of unwillingness to take this seriously, and people suffer. So, I mean, to remember only that example, I mean, that's enough for me to do anything I can to make it daily news and make it relevant to mention anywhere I can.
And Fyksetveit, before you took over as presiding bishop of Church of Norway, you've had a long career in international ecumenical work. Has that influenced your view on this issue?
I think so. I hope so. I recall 2 particular encounters that came to my mind now. One is a visit to Tahiti in the Pacific. That has been the testing ground for the French nuclear program. Meeting family members of those who have apparently been affected by this testing. Cancer, different kind of illnesses, also from birth. And to understand this is real. It's not just pictures we have about what's happening out there in the ocean, but human beings directly affected by these testing activities, even if they were only testing. But another one is a meeting I had in Fukushima half a year after the incident with the nuclear plant there. Then I realized that the Japanese people have this in their backbone, that it just cannot happen again, as they are the people who have really experienced what it means to be bombed by nuclear weapons. And then I realized that this was not just an issue about pollution, it was the existential issue that goes beyond any normal discussion about threats. So both those encounters have told me, yes, this is something absolutely different from any other human anxiety and threat we are talking about.
And how do you use your public voice to push this issue higher on the agenda as faith leaders? What do you see your role as being as leader of the Church of Norway?
I think we should both be as one church, but also together with others, having a stronger voice together, both in the Christian ecumenical family, through our common voice, through, for example, the World Council of Churches that has had this on the agenda since its very beginning in 1948, that this is not just an issue about just war, it is about something totally different. And for us here in Norway, it's also important that we raise these issues together with other communities of faith. I think there are 2 or 3 ways we can do it. One is actually not only what we write in the newspapers, but how do we talk about these issues of war, of peace, of how are we as Christians called to be peacemakers, as an issue that is not only a political issue. I mean, how do we bring it into another realm so that it can have also an effect on how we act politically? And secondly, I've been looking at, since I got home back to this arena 2-3 years ago, where are the arenas where we really can raise this issue? And I have to admit, this situation now is both threatening but also worrying. Is there another accept of the status quo because there is a conventional war going on? Or is this the situation that we actually now must have this higher on the agenda, even maybe highest on the agenda again? I grew up in the 1970s and 80s where, I mean, we were fearing a nuclear war. That is in our in my youth experience myself, in a way that has come back to my children and my grandchildren's generation now.
Mr. Kobritza, among all the issues that a lead imam has on his agenda, what place does this issue have? What number on the list? Is it possible for it to be?
You know, we usually we work with the ordinary people, with the grassroots, and we are in a position to listen to people daily. And you know, sometimes we do not initiate it; they do that because you know. Our generation today, they follow the situation locally and globally, and it happens, especially when we have this war in Ukraine, and when we had the war in Bosnia, where we experienced this. I just forgot to mention, I mean, 5,000 tons of ammunition containing depleted uranium was used in Bosnia. So you can imagine rockets with its heads. It also contained uranium. domestic organizations, non-governmental organizations, they have come up with the clear evidence, but we have the policy makers, politicians, international organizations working for the governments. They don't want to listen to that. So we have to talk about that. We have to use our positions. We have to use different platforms to mention it, not to let them in peace, because they must take this seriously. And of course, when we have this war, people immediately remember everything what happened, and they are afraid, especially because I mean, I can say Bosnia, Kosovo, for example, Iraq also mentions very much. It was, you know, so much depleted uranium was used there. It's about vulnerable countries with not good standard, and when you have not very good political establishment. So it is sometimes people experience that it is very easier to use to test something that you cannot test here, actually to test on us. And in the same way, you can just imagine what kind of weapons is being used now in Ukraine. Why? Who has control? It will come later, and we have responsibilities. We as the Western European countries, rich countries, who can dictate many processes in the world. So we have to take responsibility. As I said, also here and the other Western European countries, in the US, I mean, most probably politicians, they don't like to talk very much about that. But we have to talk about that. They represent us, and we also represent, we have also our congregations. So we have just to make it news as much as possible.
Is the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons the tool that will deliver disarmament? Is it realistic to think that this treaty will in fact have an effect? Mm-hmm.
Well, we have argued like that for years. In Geneva, in New York, in many places. And I would say without the treaty, it would be much worse.
Yeah.
There is no reason to say this doesn't make sense or it doesn't have no effect. I mean, then we can say there is no effect of any diplomatic activities or any multilateral work. And I think that it has raised another awareness in the whole world that this is something that has to do with our moral responsibility all over. It is not just something we can leave to the big powers. Mm. Secondly, it is a real problem that it is not only the big powers that are having nuclear weapons. If I may, I visited North Korea several times in my former job as part of a program done by the World Council of Churches over 40 years to try to bring North and South Koreans together to create confidence. And at one point, and it was a very special point, when the former president of the US, Donald Trump, tried to establish a new type of relationship, that it was really the South Korean president who was the actor. And he encouraged us to continue, really, as churches, to maintain this relationship with North Korea. Even if there were all reasons to say, we cannot deal with you. And then, among the discussions we had with them then, why do you keep your nuclear program going? I mean, this is a huge threat to the whole region. And we said in statements that we condemned all kind of nuclear weapons and activities. But then I realized, they said, this is our life insurance. If we don't have this, we can expect an invasion of North Korea at any time.
Yeah,
and I think there is quite some truth in it. So, therefore, the treaty is not enough, but it's not enough also to leave this to the big powers. If there is no real will to build confidence among nations in the world, the nuclear weapons will become the life insurances, or the real threat, the power that even smaller nations will use. So in that perspective, yes, the treaty is important. It must be implemented, and it must be implemented by the biggest power. Otherwise, the smaller will not take this into account at all. And the major party of my experience was that, well, we can have treaties, we can have all kind of negotiations on many levels, but if there is no willingness to build confidence among nations, we will have this nuclear threat in regions, but also in the global arena. So, yes, we need treaties, but we need somebody to work on the basis of that logic of the treaties in bilateral and multilateral relations.
But the treaty makes sense. I mean, it's better to have something than nothing. I mean, to be clear. But what we experience and what we can see actually is that big powers or people with or countries, leading the huge processes. Actually, they are also tempted from time to time. I think they have to work constantly on dialogue. There must be dialogue among them all the way. I also, in the same way, I know I spent some time in Pakistan. I mean, we know when you talk to them, I mean, why do you need it and so on. I mean, same answer. So we have to protect us from India. You know. Very, very simple, but you know, I mean, the dialogue. I want to say also this. I mean, I think we are fortunate enough today, our generation, and especially in this country we live in, and I hope also in other European countries, that we have that we listen. I mean, we find platforms where we listen to each other. So long we have that kind of conversation, we listen to each other, I think there is a hope. And I'm very happy, although Norway can do much better, but we have very frequent communication with policymakers, and only that really gives hope. And I hope also other countries, and also when it comes to the communication among many countries, I mean, if we get that kind of climate, so I hope we might be safer in future, and that might be kind of a regulator, since we have it already. I mean, you can't. I don't know. I wish it can be destroyed right now and we have nothing. But that's the fact. We have it. And how to have control and how to regulate it.
Is it your impression, when you have contact with lawmakers, is it your impression that the voices of the religious community is pushing them to put more focus on this issue?
I feel not only in this case, also in other cases, our politicians, some of them, I mean, or some of them don't care, but many of them, I would say, they want to listen to us, and they do that. What I what I know, and many of us here, or maybe all of us, we are in the globalized world. So we depend on each other, and especially our state here, our country, Norway, is connected to other powers, and there is some kind of influence where you are not completely free. So you sometimes you have to do what other, especially if you are in kind of alliance, and so on. So that we feel that although they listen, and many of them would like to do something very concretely, but you feel that we are not completely free.
Dr. Fiksethwaite, the Church of Norway is, I would say, fairly often criticized for taking sides on political issues. Many politicians seem to think that the Church should stay in its lane and not offer political opinions. And in a church that is as broad as the Church of Norway, there will also always be differing opinions within the membership over any political issue. How do you balance that as a leader of the Church?
This is not a political issue in a narrow sense. This is a moral issue, and it's even a spiritual issue. It's about life or death. It's about a future or no future. So, and it's interesting to read the protocols from the bishops' conference in our church already from the 1950s, where they very strongly, I would say, far beyond what we could expect, made very strong statements about nuclear weapons, and to rely on them as part of our security. And they were quite courageous. I mean, they went beyond what was protocol in that sense. And I think this is one of the issues where we can say, I would say, with great confidence, that this is much more than a political issue. On the other hand, the idea that there is something called a just war is actually a theological issue. It's a theological tradition of having these discussions. Why? Because it is the religious, the holy wars that are the worst and most dangerous. I mean, if there's a kind of holy religious argument for a war, it can be really, really dangerous. That's what we see now also going on with Russia and Ukraine. And I think, at least for that reason, politicians should be aware of how powerful religion can be against any peace process. For that reason, at least also to discuss and to listen to religious actors, what can be done to motivate and mobilize them for an anti-war movement. I discussed some time with Jens Stoltenberg, the Ukraine, and I didn't really got his attention to how much religious problem there is in that conflict. And that disappointed me. Not because he didn't listen to me, but I think that he was not aware, in my view, that is fueling this into levels that can be going far beyond control, which we might see happen. So also in this context, yes, unfortunately, they should listen to us, not because we have the right answers, but there is actually some religious dimensions in many of these potential wars.
But
if I can add something, I don't know how it will sound, but anyway, one of our Grand Muftis in Bosnia liked to say, and I think that's in place to mention here, the politics is too important to be left to politicians alone. And the theology is also too precious, too important to be left to theologians alone.
Or imam or bishop, sorry.
Of course. And we have examples. We have examples other way here in Norway. And I mean, I don't see any problem in that, where politicians in one or another or other way interfering in the religious issues. I mean, trying in the matters of religious communities, lifestyle communities. For example, when it comes to the likestilling, equality. Nothing bad. I mean, we have communities sleeping. Someone has to wake them up and pushing them. They are not changing. They are not interfering in what we are supposed to do. But they just want to make us and to keep us awakened. And in the same way, we do to them. Don't sleep. There are people. You maybe you represent them, but you don't live with them. We live with them. They come to our mosques, our churches, synagogues, and they talk to us. Sometimes you have many politicians living in the clouds.
I want to just, in closing of this part of the session, I want to ask about, you mentioned that politicians might not always realize what a powerful motivator religious sentiment can be in a negative way. But is it your impression that politicians are understanding what a positive motivator religious sentiment can be on building consensus on an issue like this? Do you feel like you are being used enough, and how could the politicians use the faith communities more effectively on this issue?
I think they know something, and it's not so important that they listen to me or any leader, but they should be aware of, if we really want to mobilize those who are willing to both stand up, but also to work for the basic values of peace and life. The religious communities are among the strongest and strongest potential for that. And I think we have seen that in this post-Second World War realities, that churches, church-related movements have had this role in many parts of the world. And we should be, there should be a lot of expectation to us as religious communities that we actually do something together and give support to those politicians who are willing to do whatever they can to work for peace.
I mean, the time since 11th September has shown us that actually politicians came to know that they can't tackle the whole situation alone. They need partners. Maybe they tried, security control at the airports and so many things. Overnight, we witnessed. But actually, with the passage of time, so they concluded that they need also other actors in the society who can help us, overcome, tackle certain situations. So that's why, I mean, the time is, or we live in a time where we need alliances. And politicians, I mean, you can notice it. You also witnessed in the European Union. In the beginning, the politicians in the European Union, they have had problem to talk to us. But in the last 10 years, the situation is different, very different, and also on the national level. I mean, that's why I think that's happening. But when it comes to this topic, it can be better.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Fix-de-Tveit. We're going to move on to the next part of our session. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the president of the Norwegian Hindu youth organization, Arena for Young Hindus. I would like you all to help me welcome Miss Yuhashni Shankar.
First of all, I would like to thank STL and ICAN for giving me the wonderful opportunity to stand in front of all of you here today, to represent youngsters and Hindus in the cause of peace, and to ban nuclear weapons around the world. Nuclear weapons have, till now, among the youngsters in majority, been connected to the Second World War and the history books. We thought the incidents that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were horrible when we learned about it, and then that was it. When we learned about that was so distant for us that we couldn't quite relate to the consequences. But when the war in Ukraine started and the threat about nuclear weapons again started to spread like wildfire in the media, that's when there was a huge talk about that among the youngsters, especially when the schools started to inform parents about buying iodine tablets. A topic that felt so far away and distant suddenly became a possible reality. But the truth is that many youngsters don't think or talk about the nuclear weapons anymore, now that the media haven't brought up that much lately. I actually asked my sister in 9th grade whether she and her classmates talk about the nuclear weapons. She said that they only thought about it when the teacher told them about the iodine tablets. She said that they only thought about it when their teacher told them about their iodine tablets and nothing much after that. And when I talked more with her about the nuclear threat and the consequences of a nuclear bomb, that's when I realized that they actually don't know almost anything about the nuclear weapons and the impact they have when used. And her very first response when I informed her was, then why do some nations have them? Why can't we get rid of them? And that's exactly why we are here today. I am the president of the Organization for Young Hindus in Norway, and also belong to one of the temples in Norway. Hinduism is a religion that promotes peace among people through the belief that everyone has gods, are God's children, and that we all are related. In that case, Hindus all over the world really hope for peace and a world without war and threat of nuclear weapons. The temples in Norway haven't taken any acts on their own, but through daily prayers, we always pray for a good world for everyone. The Hindu organizations in Norway support ongoing acts against nuclear weapons through other organizations and will help in any way when the need rises. But I personally hope that the temples and Hindu organizations in Norway do something more to give their voice against nuclear weapons and promote peace. I personally hope that the different nations in the world understand the need to ban nuclear weapons and realize that the impact they have. We have one world. Since I actually also studied geology in Oslo University, I can with certainty say that many resources we have are indeed limited. The nuclear weapons, if used, will wipe out entire ecosystems and animals, and of course, people who are living here. I also hope that there will be more information given to the children and youngsters in Norway about the threat the nuclear weapons have and the impact they will have when used. Many children doesn't even know what will happen due to the radiations that will cause if the nuclear weapons are used. And I really hope that the nuclear weapons will be banned very soon, so everyone can live in peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker for this session is a board member of the Norwegian Humanist Association. He's also a member of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Please welcome Dr. Martin Mikkelsen.
First of all, I would like to say thank you to STL and ICAN for hosting this conference and for inviting us. I was part of the first ICAN conference here in Oslo 10 years ago, and I heard it when Espen Barth Eide said that this was an issue he would like to work for. I will come back to that later. Nuclear weapons has been argued for as a necessity in war, as a weapon in war, and for political stability. But most of all, it's an inhumane weapon. To educate this view has been one of ICAN's most important issues. And that's also the view that talks to us in humanist associations, because we work for humanist rights or values. A weapon that kills both by warmth, pressure, and radiation, and it does not discriminate military personnel from civilians. So, ICAN's other important contributions has been a professionalization of the anti-nuclear movement. A highly professional staff that can meet politicians and work on a daily basis has moved the movement forwards and lifted the movements up into another league. But a movement needs organizations and peoples to legitimize their view. And this is where we come in as supporters and members, both organizations and people. The organizations that do not have this issue as their main focus, we need a campaign that can remind us about this. And this is the third thing I just want to talk to you a little bit about. From 10 years ago, when Espen Barth Eide was at the ICAN conference, there was a lot of politicians there. And Arbeiderpartiet here in Norway, they were very for this, but later they have done nothing. And this is why we need the campaign, and this is why the organizations must work for this, because we have to remind the politicians that we are still here and we want something to happen. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mikkelsen. I also want to thank Ms. Shankar, Mr. Korbelitsa, and Dr. Fiksetveit for being with us today. Thank you also to the Council for Religious and Life Stance Communities in Norway and the Council on Ecumenical and International Relations in the Church of Norway for organizing this session. I think this has been a very enlightening hour, and I think it's given us all food for thought and spirit. So thank you all for being here.